The haunted ship. It was said that the ship, the SS Queen Anne, had been lost at sea with all hands on board. But the truth was far more sinister. The crew had mutinied, killing the captain and the loyal members of the crew before they themselves met a grisly fate. The ship had become cursed, and it sailed the seas for decades as a ghost ship, with the spirits of the dead crew haunting its decks. Years had passed since anyone had seen the Queen Anne, and it was believed to have sunk to the bottom of the ocean. But then, one day, a group of adventurous sailors discovered it. Adrift in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, they boarded the ship, eager to explore its abandoned decks and uncover its secrets. But as soon as they set foot on board, they felt a sense of unease. The ship was silent, but it felt like there was something watching them, waiting in the shadows. They split up, each one exploring a different part of the ship. The first mate, a burly man named John, made his way down to the hold. As he descended the stairs, he heard a strange whispering sound. He turned, but there was no one there. Suddenly, a cold wind blew through the hold, and John felt a chill run down his spine. He turned to leave, but the door was stuck. He pulled and pulled, but it wouldn't budge. The whispering grew louder, and John realized that it wasn't just a sound. It was voices. The voices of the dead crew whispering in his ear, calling him by name. Meanwhile, the captain of the ship, a man named David, was exploring the upper deck. He had always been fascinated by ghost stories, and he was excited to explore a real-life haunted ship. But as he walked along the deck, he heard a strange noise. It was a rattling, scraping sound, like something was dragging itself across the wood. He turned and saw it. A figure, covered in tattered rags, was dragging itself towards him. Its eyes were hollow, and its mouth hung open in a silent scream. David backed away, but the figure kept coming. It was moving faster now, and David realized that it wasn't just one figure. There were dozens of them crawling towards him, their limbs twisted and broken. He turned and ran, but he didn't get far. The figures caught up to him, and he felt their cold, dead fingers wrap around his ankles. They pulled him down, and he felt himself being dragged along the deck, towards the edge of the ship. He screamed for help, but no one came. The ship was deserted, and he was alone with the dead crew. The sailors who had boarded the Queen Anne were never seen again. Some say that the ship is still sailing the seas, haunted by the spirits of the dead crew, waiting for its next victims. In the heart of the city, there stood a museum filled with ancient and cursed artifacts. The objects were fascinating to look at, but they were also said to be haunted by evil spirits that possessed them. Most of the museum staff dismissed the rumors, but there were some who believed that the artifacts were cursed and dangerous. One night, after the museum had closed, the staff were cleaning up when they noticed that the objects in one of the exhibits were rearranged. They brushed it off as a prank, but things began to get stranger. At night, they would hear strange noises coming from the exhibit, as if someone was moving the objects. One of the staff members, Sarah, was particularly sensitive to the supernatural. She had always felt uneasy around the cursed objects, but now she was convinced that something was wrong. She confided in her friend and fellow staff member, Jack, who didn't believe her at first, but he soon changed his mind. One night, Jack decided to investigate the exhibit. As he approached, he saw one of the artifacts, a mask, move by itself. He stepped back, but then the mask flew towards him, as if propelled by an unseen force. Jack barely managed to dodge it, and he knew then that Sarah had been right all along. The possessed artifacts were becoming more and more aggressive. One night, a staff member was found dead in the exhibit room, with a cursed dagger in their hand. The police were called, but they couldn't find any evidence of foul play. It was as if the dagger had acted on its own, driven by the malevolent force that had possessed it. The museum was closed for investigation, but the possessed artifacts had already caused too much damage. Several staff members had disappeared, and those who remained were too terrified to go near the exhibit room. Sarah knew that they had to do something to stop the curse. She had heard of a ritual that could exorcise the evil spirits, but it required a sacrifice. She knew that it was a dangerous plan, but she was willing to risk her life to save her friends and colleagues. With the help of Jack, Sarah performed the ritual in the exhibit room. It was a terrifying experience as the artifacts seemed to come alive and attack them. But Sarah was determined to complete the ritual, and she managed to exorcise the spirits from the cursed objects. The artifacts were no longer possessed, but the damage had already been done. The museum was closed permanently, and Sarah and Jack were haunted by the memory of the cursed objects. They knew that they had saved lives, but they also knew that they had come close to losing their own. As they walked away from the museum for the last time, they both felt a sense of relief that it was over, but also a sense of dread. They knew that there were other cursed artifacts out there, waiting to be discovered and possessed by malevolent spirits. They could only hope that someone would be able to stop them before it was too late. Sophia had always been a happy and lively child until she turned 6. Suddenly, she became withdrawn, started talking to herself, and behaved erratically. Her parents, Emma and Michael, tried to help her, but nothing seemed to work. They took her to various doctors and specialists, but nobody could figure out what was wrong with her. One day, while cleaning out their attic, Emma stumbled upon an old Ouija board. She had never believed in such things, but out of desperation, she decided to give it a try. She and Michael gathered around the board with Sophia and asked if anyone was there. At first, nothing happened, but then the planchette started moving on its own, spelling out messages. At first, the messages seemed innocent enough, but then they became dark and menacing. The board claimed to be the spirit of a man who had died in the house years ago and had been looking for a host to possess. Sophia's parents were horrified and quickly ended the session, but it was too late. Something had attached itself to Sophia, and they could feel its presence. As the days passed, Sophia's behavior became more erratic and violent. She started talking in a voice that wasn't hers, and seemed to know things that she couldn't possibly have known. Emma and Michael were at their wits' end and didn't know what to do. They decided to take her to a priest, hoping that he could perform an exorcism. The priest was hesitant at first, but when he saw Sophia's condition, he agreed to perform the ritual. The exorcism was long and grueling, and at times it seemed as though the entity would never leave Sophia's body. But eventually, the priest prevailed, and Sophia was released from the possession. However, the family was not out of danger yet. The entity that had possessed Sophia was still around and looking for a new host. It started tormenting the family, moving objects around the house, and even causing physical harm to them. Emma and Michael knew that they had to do something to get rid of the entity once and for all. They turned to a team of paranormal investigators who specialized in dealing with malevolent spirits. The investigators set up cameras and equipment around the house, hoping to capture evidence of the entity's presence. They also performed a cleansing ritual, hoping to banish the spirit from the house. At first, nothing seemed to happen, but then the cameras captured footage of a shadowy figure moving around the house. The investigators realized that the entity was still there and was more powerful than they had thought. They redoubled their efforts and performed another cleansing ritual, hoping that this one would be enough. Finally, after weeks of trying, the investigators were successful. They managed to banish the entity from the house and cleanse it of its malevolent presence. Sophia returned to her normal self, and Emma and Michael could finally breathe a sigh of relief. However, they knew that they could never let their guard down again. They learned that sometimes, even the innocent-looking objects could be dangerous, and that they should be careful about what they brought into their home.